1976, late at night. Somewhere in a quiet California neighborhood, a family is asleep. Doors locked, windows shut. He got in anyway. The next morning, neighbors noticed something was wrong. Police showed up. Yellow tape went up, but there was no evidence, no witnesses, just a feeling that whoever did this was still out there, and he would come back. Nobody knew his name. Police called him the East Area Rapist, then the original Night Stalker, then finally the Golden State Killer. The name kept changing. The man was never found. From 1974 to 1986, 12 years, he moved through California like a ghost, started in Sacramento, moved to the Bay Area, then drifted south to Southern California. 13 people murdered. More than 50 people sexually assaulted, over 100 home burglaries, and every single time, nothing. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no mistakes. He vanished the same way he arrived, like he was never there. This part is what makes your skin crawl. He didn't just show up, he planned. Days before an attack, he would walk through neighborhoods in broad daylight. He watched which houses had weak locks. He noted when families left for work. He figured out which windows were easiest to get through. Sometimes he called his victims on the phone before he struck, just to hear their voice, just to make sure they were home. He wore gloves. He wrapped his shoes so he wouldn't leave footprints. He brought his own rope. He knew exactly what he was doing. And the most terrifying part? He almost never made a mistake. Police interviewed over 100 suspects over 10 years. Nothing. This story isn't just about crime statistics. There are real people here. Brian and Katie Maggiore, both barely in their 20s. On an evening walk in Rancho Cordova in 1978, he followed them, shot them both, Lyman and Charlene Smith, asleep in their own home in Ventura County. Their child woke up the next morning to a house that would never be the same. Robert Offerman and Deborah Manning, a psychiatrist and his girlfriend, December 1980. He broke in and killed them both and disappeared into the night. Remember these names? Because they weren't statistics. They were people. They had lives and plans and families who loved them, and all of that was taken away by someone who had no reason, no motive, no remorse. Then in 1986, everything stopped. No new attacks, no new murders, no new anything. Did he die? Did he end up in prison for something else? Did he just decide to stop? Nobody knew. The cases got filed away. Detectives retired. New crimes came along. The world moved on. But the families of the victims couldn't move on. One survivor said she couldn't sleep properly for 30 years. Not because of nightmares, but because she knew he was still out there somewhere living a normal life while she couldn't. That's what cold cases do to people. They don't just leave wounds, they leave wounds that never get to close. In the early 2000s, a detective named Paul Holes pulled the old files back out. He became obsessed with this case. Spent years going through old evidence, met with survivors, stared at crime scene photos until he felt like he knew this man, even though he'd never seen his face. The one thing they had was DNA, collected from crime scenes decades ago. But that DNA didn't match anyone in any criminal database because he had never been caught. So the DNA just sat there, waiting. Paul Holes wasn't ready to give up. He kept asking one question: what if there's another way to find him? 2017. An investigator named Barbara Ray Venter came up with something that had never been tried in a case like this before. Genealogy DNA databases, sites like GED Match, where ordinary people upload their DNA to learn about their ancestry. No criminal records, just regular people curious about where they came from. Here's what she did. She uploaded the Golden State Killer's crime scene DNA into GED Match. No exact match, but distant relatives showed up. Think about what that means. If you can find his third or fourth cousins, people who share a small percentage of his DNA, you can start building a family tree. And if you build the tree wide enough and narrow it down carefully enough, eventually you might find the man at the center of it. It took months of painstaking work, hundreds of family trees, thousands of names cross-referenced against age, location, physical description. But slowly, a name kept coming up. Joseph James DeAngelo, 72 years old, living quietly in Citrus Heights, just outside Sacramento. Kept to himself mostly. And here's the detail that hits different when you hear it. He was a former police officer. That's why he never left evidence. That's why he knew exactly how investigators thought and worked. That's why for 12 years, he moved through California completely undetected. He wasn't just a predator, he was trained. Investigators didn't arrest him immediately. They watched him first. They needed confirmation. One afternoon, he walked outside to put his trash out. An investigator waited until he went back inside, then walked over and collected a discarded item from the bin, sent it for DNA testing. It matched. 40 years, 13 murders, 50+ assaults, and in the end, it came down to something he threw in the garbage. April 24th, 2018. Police surrounded his home in Citrus Heights. He walked outside. Handcuffs went on. A 72-year-old man who had spent decades living an ordinary life. His neighbors had no idea. His family had no idea. To everyone around him, he was just a quiet, retired cop. Inside, he was something else entirely. When detectives finally got to question him, one of them leaned in and said, "We've got your DNA." DeAngelo looked up and said nothing. June 2020. Joseph James DeAngelo stood in a Sacramento courtroom. He pleaded guilty, admitted to 13 murders, admitted to dozens of sexual assaults spanning multiple counties across California, life in prison, no possibility of parole. But what happened next? That's the part that stays with you. One by one, survivors and family members of victims stood up and spoke directly to him. A daughter whose parents were killed told him, "You took everything from me. I was just a child." A survivor looked him in the eye and said, "I spent 40 years afraid of you. Look at you now. You're just a small, pathetic old man." He sat there in a wheelchair, head mostly down, offering almost nothing. And that silence said everything. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. Without DNA genealogy technology, he probably never gets caught. Ever. He would have died in his bed. His neighbors would have attended his funeral. Nobody would have known. But the evidence waited. The DNA waited. Paul Holes waited. Barbara Ray Venter waited. And the survivors, who deserved answers more than anyone, they waited the longest, 40 years. And justice came anyway. Late, painful, long overdue. But it came. This case changed law enforcement forever. It proved that no matter how careful a killer is, science doesn't forget. Science doesn't give up. And science has no expiration date. If you thought you got away with it, you might want to think again. More real American crime stories are coming. Subscribe so you don't miss a single one.